South Korean President Yoon began his 5-day state visit to the Netherlands with a key focus on forging a chip alliance. He will be visiting the headquarters of ASML together with the leaders of Korean chip giants Samsung and SK. The South Korean Defense Ministry has seen its budget boosted to nearly 350 trillion won over the next 5 years to better counter military threats from North Korea through bolstering its three-axis deterrent system. All 7 BTS members are now enlisted in the army as Jimin and Jungkook began their mandatory service today. We take a closer look at what their absence means for the K-pop industry and what's to come next. It's December 12, 2023. This is News Center.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Min. President Yoon begins his official state visit to the Netherlands today, starting with an array of royal engagements hosted by the Dutch King and Queen, with a key focus on forging a chip alliance. He is about to attend a welcoming ceremony held in central Amsterdam before entering the palace. Before we bring you the scenes live, we first connect with our correspondent Oh Soo-young, who is following the president's state visit. Hi, Soo-young. Let's start with the opening ceremony. What are we about to see in a few moments?
Well, Dongmin, we're going to see President Yoon and First Lady Kim welcomed by King Willem Alexander and Queen Maxima in Dam Square. Now, that's considered the heart of Amsterdam, where the opulent royal palace is located, as well as the National Monument. There's going to be an introduction of the delegations, followed by the Marine Band of the Royal Netherlands Navy, playing the national anthems of both countries, then an inspection of an honor guard. And once President Yoon and First Lady Kim are in the palace grounds, representatives of the Dutch authorities will be introduced to them and a reception will then be held. Then the first couple will have a private lunch with the King and Queen.
Right, and now what do the rest of the president's royal engagement look like for the rest of the day? And also tell us about the significance of this state visit.
Right, there's also going to be a wreath-laying ceremony at the National Monument in the same Dam Square. And later today in the evening, the first couple will attend an official state banquet with the King and Queen at the Royal Palace. Now, the President and the Dutch King will both make speeches at the event, celebrating the first state visit to the Netherlands by a president of South Korea since the two countries established diplomatic relations in 1961, so that's 62 years. The King and Queen visited South Korea in 2014, actually, and in November last year, President Yoon and Prime Minister Mark Rutte, they agreed to elevate bilateral ties to a strategic partnership. So this trip really signifies a deepening relationship, particularly in areas crucial to both national and economic security for both countries, as they will partner in semiconductors and other high-tech areas such as artificial intelligence, as well as logistics and green energy. We're probably going to see President Yoon and Prime Minister Rutte ink MOUs tomorrow following their bilateral talks at The Hague.
And Soo-young, before I let you go, President Yoon is also expected to visit the headquarters of ASML today. There's a lot of anticipation building up around that.
That's right. President Yoon, upon his arrival, the first thing he actually did was emphasize that the focal point of his visit is going to be forging a semiconductor alliance with the Netherlands, which of course is home to the world's largest producer of lithography machines, which is very vital for making semiconductors, which happens to be South Korea's main export cash cow. Now, President Yoon will be joined by King Willem Alexander, as well as the heads of South Korea's global chip giants Samsung and SK Hynix. Now, this is speculation, of course, but they could be given a glimpse of ASML's most advanced lithography machines, capable of producing 2-nanometer chips. Now, this would be a very positive signal for South Korean firms as they aim to procure chip-making materials and equipment to really boost their production capacity.
Our correspondent Oh Soo-young traveling with the president. Thank you. So as we heard from Soo-young, in a moment, President Yoon and First Lady Kim will be hosted by Dutch King Willem Alexander and Queen Maxima for a welcoming ceremony in Dam Square, Amsterdam. We'll take you to the scene. Our presidential office correspondent Kim Do-yeon joins me in the studio. Hi, Do-yeon.
Hello, good to be here.
Good to have you here. What do we expect from the ceremonial welcome?
Well, as we know, this is his 7th state visit of the year, so we know the protocols by now, and each country, of course, have their own touches of the welcoming ceremony. But what we expect, as we've heard briefly from Soo-young, is that there will be an introduction of the delegation. There also will be 21 rounds of blank artillery shots at the ceremony. Also, the Marine Band of the Royal Netherlands Navy will be playing the national anthems of the both countries. And we'll see some inspection of the guards at the
Inspection
scene.
of honors, right. And President Yoon is the first Korean leader to pay a state visit to the Netherlands since a bilateral diplomatic relations was established. It's a relation that has lasted for over 6 decades. How significant is his trip?
Right, it's the first one by a South Korean president, and the two countries have over 60 years bilateral ties. And it's important to note that Netherlands has the second highest trade volume with South Korea among the EU countries. That's a significant amount, and considering the size of Netherlands, and it, of course, President, you mentioned the focal point is the semiconductor and the cooperation. So that's also very significant at this point where South Korea is trying to create a resilient supply chain, especially in the semiconductor industry. And I do want to make a note that the state visit invitation to Netherlands was the first state visit invitation that Yoon received, actually. It was during his visit to Madrid for NATO summit in June of 2022. So this is a highly anticipated visit, one that's been coming for about a year and a half.
And Doyon, the Netherlands is home to ASML, a leading semiconductor equipment producer. And President Yoon is set to make a trip to its headquarters during his state visit, during which the Dutch king will accompany him along with South Korean Samsung Electronics Lee Jae-yong and SK's Choi Tae-won. What significance does this state visit have in terms of a triple alliance?
Right. So ASML holds a key technology in EUV equipment. Now, all semiconductor producers will need this equipment to make their equipment produce chips. And it's imperative that they have good relationship with ASML. Now, South Korea, while being a big producer of chips, is still behind in equipment and key materials. So it is important that South Korean companies, especially Samsung and SK leaders, visit or join Yoon in this trip and visit. And also there's going to be a visit to the clean room, and we'll see President Yoon maybe in a coverall and kind of look through the scenes there. So it's important that President Yoon takes a lead and kind of build a bridge between ASML and Korean producers as they try to get more market share in the global scenes.
Now, let's go straight to Dam Square in Amsterdam, where Dutch King Willem-Alexander is receiving the South Korean first couple. There you see President Yoon Suk-yeol and First Lady Kim Gun-hee. They just arrived and are ceremonially welcomed by King Willem-Alexander and Queen Maxima. Looks like the honor guards are ready for the ceremonial welcome. we heard the national anthems of the Republic of Korea and the Netherlands. So Doyeon, while we're waiting for the ceremonial procedures, just give us a recap. What do we expect from the ceremonial welcome?
Right now, we're past the national anthems. So he's expected to do the inspection of the guards.
Yes.
Yeah. And
there, I believe there will be a salute of 21 guns being fired to welcome the South Korean leader.
Not sure if the microphone will or has caught that, but
and now
there's going to be 21 rounds.
Yes, and now the Dutch king and the visiting South Korean president are inspecting the guards of honor. Let's take a look here. So President Yoon's visit to the Netherlands comes as South Korea and the Netherlands mark 62 years, as Doyeon, you just said, of their diplomatic relations. President Yoon Suk-yeol is the first South Korean leader to pay a state visit to this country since South Korea established diplomatic ties with the Netherlands in 1961. And over past 60 years, Seoul has developed cooperation with Amsterdam in trade. Now they're eyeing to deepen their cooperation in semiconductors, arms industry, energy, nuclear power, and other cutting-edge technologies. For those who are just tuning in, you are watching the South Korean president and the Dutch king inspecting the guards of honor. Doyeon, tell us more. What can you tell us about the two countries looking forward to creating a semiconductor dialogue channel for their chip alliance? We also expect them to upgrade their strategic partnership to the next level.
Right. As President Yoon has emphasized before his trip, it's also notable that he mentioned this during a meeting of arms industry export for South Korea. He said semiconductor is a key part to cutting-edge technology and kind of the basis behind some of the core technology for defense systems. So that's also a reason why he finds this trip to Netherlands very important at this point for South Korea's resilient supply chain for producing semiconductors.
And I want to talk about this Dam Square, this place, the venue. It's a town square in Amsterdam, the most populated city of the Netherlands, also the capital city. On the west side of the square, there is a royal palace, a royal residence, and on the opposite side of the square, which there is a national monument to which we believe President Yoon and King Willem Alexander will later pay a visit together, and they honor the victims of the World War II. Looks like the leaders just are entering the royal palace in Amsterdam. They will be attending a royal reception, later followed by a private lunch with the king and queen. And there you see children are now welcoming the South Korean first couple. We believe they are
Korean school students.
Korean school students learning Korean alphabet Hangul in that country, in the Netherlands. Am I right, Doyeon?
That's right. It was expected for him to go and say hello to the kids there. I also want to note that Netherlands is also known for very tall men. And we can see that King Willem Alexander is very tall.
Yeah. And later, they will be laying a wreath at the National Monument in Dam Square, and I believe they will also visit the headquarters of ASML, as we heard from Soo-young, the supplier of technology for semiconductor manufacturing using lithography equipment. It's a key export product to Korea. And in the evening, the Dutch king and queen will host a state banquet at the Royal Palace in Amsterdam. We expect the Korean president and the king deliver an address.
Dit is jouw foto, Koen.
Yeah, that's okay. Tell us, what more cooperation do we expect in terms of culture and people-to-people exchanges?
Right. According to the top office, they're looking to expand the number of working holiday visas with Netherlands, and that's a very usual move from this government, this administration, as they tend to focus on the younger generations when it comes to people-to-people exchanges. So that is also a very key aspect. And also, Netherlands is known for its food exports, and smart farm technology could be a way to cooperate. And a lot of Korean companies are jumping into smart farm technology. We've seen with other countries that President Yoon signed MOUs with. So that's also another form of cooperation to be an area to be deepened.
Right. The Dutch monarch and the visiting South Korean first couple are slowly walking. They're entering the palace, the royal palace. It looks like the reception is just about to start. Right, so that was the welcoming ceremony hosted by the Dutch King and Queen receiving the South Korean first couple for a state visit. Toyeon, what's in store for the president for the rest of his schedule, the 5-day trip?
Right, and I can't stress this enough. He's going to visit the ASML headquarters. That's a key part of this trip with the Dutch King. Now, there's also a banquet hosted by the King at the palace coming up after that. For Wednesday, he's set to visit The Hague. There he's set to meet with prominent Dutch politicians, including the Prime Minister, and will be able to discuss diplomatic efforts to enhance bilateral cooperation. The Hague is also home to historical sites that are related to South Korea, or Korea in general, such as the Ritterzaal and Ijin Peace Museum, which President Yoon will visit. There's also a business forum back at Amsterdam, and a Korean cultural performances, which is a customary for a state visit for the leader that's visiting for a state visit to host.
Our presidential office correspondent Kim Do-yeon, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Now we follow other stories of the day. Amid growing concerns following North Korea's recent launch of a military spy satellite, South Korea is seeking to spend more than $260 billion on defense over the next 5 years, with the focus on bolstering its three-axis deterrence system. Pae Eun-ji explains more.
The Ministry of National Defense is looking to spend nearly 350 trillion Korean won, or $266 billion over the next 5 years, to bolster the military's defense capabilities. It aims to increase the country's annual defense budget by 7% each year, so that the money available yearly, which stood at about $43 billion this year, could reach $60 billion by 2028. The spending plan is subject to National Assembly approval. The country aims to especially focus on strengthening the military's three-axis deterrence system against North Korea's military threats. Announcing the midterm defense blueprint for the 2024 to 2028 period, the ministry said it'll secure defense capabilities to swiftly detect signs of North Korean provocations through spy satellites and reconnaissance aircraft, and quickly analyze captured images. It plans to operate a total of 5 military reconnaissance satellites by 2025 and also use medium-altitude unmanned aerial vehicles to boost surveillance on key targets. By 2028, the ministry also aims to complete the deployment of tactical surface-to-surface missiles designed to destroy hostile tunnel targets, and deploy more stealth fighters and 3,000-ton submarines equipped with submarine-launched ballistic missiles. As part of efforts to better defend the capital area and the country's key facilities, it plans to use various missile systems, including the Cheongung-2 surface-to-air missile and a long-range surface-to-air missile. It also plans to develop improved versions of medium-range and long-range missiles over the next 5 years to create a multi-layered missile defense system. Pae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
South Korea and the United States will hold the second meeting of the bilateral Nuclear Consultative Group this week to strengthen the allies' nuclear response to North Korea's growing provocations. The presidential office said Tuesday that the meeting will take place on Friday in Washington, D.C., led by their national security councils with participants including officials from defense, foreign affairs, military, and intelligence sectors. The NCG was formed earlier this year as part of President Yoon and President Joe Biden's Washington declaration amid North Korea's escalating nuclear and missile threats to regional security. The upcoming meeting will evaluate progress made on initial action plans set out at the first meeting in July and specify future directives. In the Middle East, Israel's calls on Palestinian militants to surrender continue as their soldiers say they are close to dismantling the final two Hamas strongholds in northern Gaza. Meanwhile, Hamas-run Gaza's health ministry says over 18,000 Palestinians have now been killed. Lee Seung-jae has the latest.
Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said Monday that Israeli troops are encircling Hamas's last two strongholds in northern Gaza, adding that Hamas battalions in the Jabalia and Shijaya areas are on the verge of dismantling. The defense minister added that the Hamas fighters that have already surrendered said they are short of weapons and food. He went on to say that Israeli forces are near a breaking point in the northern Gaza Strip, calling upon remaining Hamas fighters to surrender, as he promised to spare their lives if they do so. The comments come as the Israel Defense Forces and the Israeli Security Agency announced last week that more than 500 Hamas and Islamic Jihad fighters had been captured over the past month. Gaza's health ministry reported that over 18,000 Palestinians have now been killed since the start of the armed conflict. The ministry spokesperson also reported that the bodies of 208 dead Palestinians were transferred to hospitals in the Gaza Strip during the past 24 hours, with over 400 others injured during that time. He called on medical teams around the world to go to the Gaza Strip to help with life-saving operations for the wounded Gazans, stressing that hundreds of wounded people are seeking treatment. Meanwhile, according to a report by the Washington Post on Monday, Israel used U.S.-supplied white phosphorus munitions in an October attack in southern Lebanon that injured at least 9 civilians. According to the report, a journalist working for the Post found remnants of 3 155mm artillery rounds fired into Deira, near the border of Israel. The attacks incinerated at least 4 homes. The rounds were said to have been saturated with white phosphorus that burns at high temperatures. Despite accusations of war crimes by human rights groups, the Israel Defense Forces said that white phosphorus shells launched by Israel are used to create smoke screens, not for targeting or causing fires, adding that it complies and goes beyond the requirements of international law. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Also on the international front, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is in the U.S. to rally continued support from Congress for Kyiv's defense against Moscow's invasion. This comes as an aid package remains stalled in Congress. Park Go-nu tells us more.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has arrived in Washington, D.C. on Monday in an attempt to rescue a U.S. defense support package worth $60 billion to Kyiv. The package is currently stalled in U.S. Congress as it's opposed by Republicans who are arguing that more money should be used for domestic security at the U.S.-Mexico border. Zelenskyy's appeal is seemingly even more crucial as Congress begins its holiday recess at the end of this week. According to a statement by the White House the day before, Zelenskyy's visit was meant to underscore the United States' unshakable commitment to supporting the people of Ukraine as they defend themselves against Russia's brutal invasion. The arrival of the Ukrainian president makes it his third visit to the U.S. since the war began in February 2022. During Zelensky's speech at the National Defense University in Washington on Monday, he asked for continued support while saying Ukraine has not given up.
Ukrainians haven't given up and won't give up. We know what to do, and you can count on Ukraine, and we hope just as much to be able to count on you.
He added, when the support of freedom fighters goes down, that is when Russia's dreams come true. Following his remark, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin promised unshakable support for Kyiv.
And the United States is proud to stand with you. And make no mistake, America's commitment to supporting Ukraine against Russian aggression is unshakable.
Meanwhile, President Zelenskyy is also set to meet with U.S. President Joe Biden on Tuesday. They are expected to discuss the U.S.'s ongoing commitment to Ukraine as well as its country's need for more funds. Park Gonu, Arirang News.
The UN's COP28 climate summit is yet to reach an agreement over the summit statement. This comes as a large group of countries criticize the draft agreement's omission of a commitment to phase out fossil fuels. Yoon reports.
The COP28 climate summit negotiations drag on as countries have not come to an agreement on the summit statement. After many countries criticized the draft version as too weak because it omitted a phase-out of fossil fuels, a new draft document was expected early on Tuesday, ahead of the scheduled close of the conference at 11 a.m. local time. According to Reuters, a 100-strong group of countries, including the United States, EU, and Australia, demanded a firm commitment and criticized the draft as too weak. Deals at UN climate summits must be passed by consensus by the nearly 200 countries present. On Monday, a draft of the COP28 agreement was published by the summit president, the United Arab Emirates. It proposed various options and called for reducing the production and consumption of fossil fuels, but the draft did not use the words phase out as seen in previous agreements. An earlier draft on Friday had included phase out, something climate campaigners, low-lying island states, and the European Union have been advocating for. But the latest draft called for reducing the consumption and production of fossil fuels in a just, orderly, and equitable manner, so as to achieve net zero by before or around 2050 in keeping with the science. It also provides 8 options that countries could use to cut emissions, including tripling renewable energy capacity by 2030 and scaling up technologies to capture CO2 emissions. According to Reuters, sources familiar with the discussions said the United Arab Emirates had come under pressure from Saudi Arabia to drop any mention of fossil fuels from the text. Saudi Arabia is the de facto leader of the OPEC oil producers group, of which the UAE is a member. Greenhouse gas emissions from burning fossil fuels are the main cause of climate change, and despite the rapid growth of renewable energy use, around 80% of the world's energy is produced using fossil fuels. Yoon, Arirang News.
All 7 BTS members are now enlisted in the military as Jimin and Jungkook began their mandatory service today. Fans have to wait until at least 2025 to see the whole group back together again. Our An Sung-jin takes a closer look at what their absence could mean for the K-pop industry.
Starting with Jin in December 2022, the entirety of BTS will now be serving their country. With RM and V joining the army on Monday, the final 2 members of BTS, Jimin and Jungkook, followed them on Tuesday afternoon. Jin will be discharged first in June 2024, but BTS fans will have to wait until at least June 2025 when the final members are discharged before they can see BTS back together again. Just like their fandom name ARMY, most of the members will be serving in the army, apart from Suga, who is serving in social services due to a shoulder cartilage injury. J-Hope, the group's main performance dancer, joined the army in April this year and will be discharged in October 2024. The 4 members RMV, Jimin, Jungkook, who joined this week, are all set to be discharged in June 2025. And as Suga's social service duty requires him to serve 3 more months than the regular army, he will be the last member to finish his duties a few days later. As some members will begin their solo endeavors after their discharge, hopes are high that they will gather together in 2025 and reinitiate their second chapter as a group. As the group's recently renewed contract period begins in 2025, they could release part 2 of their album, The Most Beautiful Moment in Life, which will mark its 10-year anniversary in the year of their discharge. V left a message on his social media that they have prepared much content for during their military service, suggesting the release of various content for their fans. On December 20th, BTS will release a documentary titled BTS Monuments Beyond the Star, which shows their 10-year journey since their debut. A culture critique says that their absence could be a chance for the spotlight to shine on other K-pop artists as well.
I think it's nearly impossible to completely fill in for BTS. However, as much as they worked on building their career, other K-pop artists would have worked hard as well, and this may be a chance to pay closer attention to other K-pop artists.
Though they may not appear on stage during their military service, as they have prepared much content, there's plenty to fill the void. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Amid an aging population and a rising number of young people delaying marriage in South Korea, last year around 35% of households were people living alone. According to Statistics Korea on Tuesday, the number of single-person households in 2022 rose to over 7.5 million. Both the figure and the proportion marked a record high since relevant data was first compiled in 2015. Meanwhile, the annual income earned by single-person households rose by 11% year-on-year to around 30 million Korean won or $23,000, narrowing the gap with the overall average from the year before. However, it still falls short of half of the average household income. With just 120 days left until South Korea's 22nd general election on April 10th next year, the preliminary candidate registration began this morning. The hopefuls, once registered, can begin their promotional campaigns. Today, we look ahead at the election with our National Assembly correspondent, Lee Shi-hu. Hi, Shi.
Welcome. Hi, Jungmin.
Hi. So now the official registration of candidates is set for March, and 20 days before the actual election. Why start early? What's the purpose?
Right, so this early registration system intends to give new politicians some ample time to promote themselves ahead of the official registration in March. Now, this system was introduced in 2004 to offer a fair chance to those aiming for a seat in the National Assembly for the first time. Once registered, the candidates can open an election campaign office, distribute promotional posters and name cards, and fundraise up to 150 million Korean won, or a little over $110,000. So the registration essentially marks the start of the election race.
Now the race has begun. What's coming up between now and April 10th?
Well, a lot is happening in the next 4 months leading up to the voting day. If you look at the timeline here, by February 10th or 60 days before voting, overseas voters must complete their voter registration. Now, for 2 days beginning March 21st, the candidates will officially register. Overseas voting will begin on March 27th. The next day, the official campaigns will begin, and this is when you will see full-blown campaigns and hear promotional songs and cheering on the streets. Early voting in Korea will begin on April 5th. Then on the 10th, the official voting will take place all day from 6 in the morning to 6 in the evening. The ballot count will begin right after to decide the winners.
Shi-hu, the Election Act asks the National Assembly to finalize electoral districts a year before the election. But it's already over half a year past the deadline. When will the candidates and the voters get to know the final list of districts?
Well, that's a little hard to tell at the moment. The National Election Commission's Committee on Finalizing the Districts offered a proposal last week. It suggests dividing up 6 districts and combining 6 other districts due to population changes. The main opposition Democratic Party says that the proposal favors the ruling People Power Party, while the PPP says it simply reflects changes in population.
We absolutely cannot accept this proposal, which only reflects the stance of the PPP.
Some with preconceived views might think it is disadvantageous, but it's not a proposal favorable or unfavorable to certain parties.
The delay in the process is causing candidates to register to run without knowing exactly which district they might be trying to represent.
And the election comes about 2 years after the launch of the Yoon administration. How does that affect the race?
Right, so currently the parliament has a minority ruling, majority opposition status. This has repeatedly led to fierce clashes and standoffs during the legislative process, where the opposition would use their majority to pass bills that will later be vetoed by the president. So really, for the ruling party, this is an opportunity to create the momentum and support that the Yoon administration needs to carry out its national task. For the opposition, it's a chance to maintain their voice. So all parties are entering this race with these absolute goals in mind.
All right, thanks for your report, Shihu. Keep us posted.
Thank you.
The snow and rain that has been persisting for a few days will stop tonight. Temperatures tomorrow will still be milder than usual. Temperature swings are expected in most areas, with maximum temperatures staying in double digits. Please dress up warm both in the morning and the evening. Tomorrow, the clouds will gradually increase before more rain arrives on Thursday morning. The fine dust level will be good to normal in the entire area due to smooth atmospheric diffusion. Most regions will start off at single-digit temperatures tomorrow morning. Seoul will be at 1 degree Celsius, Gwangju 6 degrees. Daytime highs will be a bit higher than today. Seoul will go up to 11, Daejeon, Daegu, and Gyeongju 14 degrees. After another spell of rain across the country on Friday, an Arctic cold wave of around -10 degrees is expected to rage again from the weekend. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is News Center for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session coming up.